Again, Tom Davis, former House of Representatives member, Northern Virginia, Republican, in leadership in the House. Newt Gingrich, when I went up there to interview him when I was with the Florida Daytona Beach News Journal, I got an interview with him in his office, and I'm like, who's your favorite congressman? It was just like kind of one of those interviews. It was pretty good, and I remember he said, Tom Davis. I'm like, who's that? Well, he's a guy from Northern Virginia. I love Tom Davis. Go to Florida, go back home, get me about 5 more just like him. I'm like, well, why do you love Tom Davis so much? He says, because he does what he has to do, but when I need him, I got to make one phone call, I hang up, and that's it. He's there. I get it. He gets it. So that was my Newt Gingrich, Tom Davis story. Tom, good to have you with us, man.
John, thanks. It's a depressing morning for Nats fans. The good news, though, my wife reminded me, is we probably saved $20,000 in playoff tickets now, so it's not all bad.
Well, yeah, playoff and perhaps World Series tickets, but
Right.
you know, this 5-hour game, I mean, you guys can't get out of a divisional series. As you sat through that meltdown last night, I mean, what were you thinking during that game?
Well, you keep your fingers crossed. I kept my fingers crossed when we were up 4-1, and I kept my fingers crossed when we were down by 4. This is baseball. There's no clock in baseball. It's a funny game, and the ball bounces away from you sometimes. I mean, a lot of mistakes that we made last night, and when you lose by 1 run, you can look back and say, what if? But, once again, they couldn't make it when we needed them.
Well, that's it. And I mean, you were down 8-4, then it was 8-6, then it was 9-6. You end up losing 9-8, trying to rally at the end. But if you're a Nats fan, I mean, you score 8 runs at home in the 5th game, you're supposed to win that game. So just a tough night all around. No question.
It's a tough night. Anyway, I'm just trying to lick my wounds at this point. Now I can finally focus on the state election now that the Nats are out of it.
All right, now that they're out, we can focus on that.
So let's. The other night, so hockey season started. Something gets my mind off politics.
All right. Well, look, I'm the same, and that's why I get annoyed with all this football shenanigans about standing up, because I'm a Titans fan. When I put Tennessee on, all I'm interested in is the game. That's my escape. And so when the commentators are talking about politics, it's aggravating to me. I just get that all week. Tom Davis, let's go to the governor's race.
Okay.
Obama coming into town on Thursday. You know he's going to have a massive turnout. It's going to be a huge rally. He's coming here for one reason, and that is to spike turnout and enthusiasm for the otherwise put me to sleep, give me the no-dose campaign of Ralph Northam, the lieutenant governor. Is that going to work, and where do we stand now in this race?
So my understanding of Virginia politics, and I never lost an election in 29 years, is that Virginia is not a two-party state. It's really 2 one-party states. And if you look at it and analyze it from that direction, bringing Obama in is smart because it drives in the one-party state in Northern Virginia and in the urban areas among African-American voters, college-town voters. Driving that vote up is critical. For Republicans, they have a base as well. They have to drive up. And that base is a little bit dispirited now. And so I think that's why the polls are showing right now, I think without question, everyone has shown Northam with a lead varying from everything from 1 point to 13 points. But the Democratic enthusiasm is higher right now than Republican enthusiasm. And recognizing that Ralph Northam doesn't set the world on fire with his speeches, he's a wonderful man, but he gives a fireside chat and the fire goes out. That bringing Obama in and firing up that base is very critical to their electoral chances.
All right, so you agree with me that bringing Obama into Richmond on Thursday for the Northam campaign, great move, right, Tom?
I do. Yeah, and look, whatever Obama's numbers were, his numbers went up his last year in office. No drama, right. Obama. He's a contrast to people right now that are upset with Trump. Democrats need to get those people to the polls. And Obama gets needed publicity for the team, and he helps rally that minority base out there right now, which I don't think is that enthusiastic about a race, but a good high African-American turnout in this state benefits the Democrats tremendously.
Should Ed Gillespie counter that by getting the president to come to maybe Southwest Virginia or Hampton Roads for a rally with a Republican ticket in Virginia?
Well, I do Southwest Virginia. I do that 81 corridor. The rural vote's a tough vote to get out, but he needs it at this point. He didn't get it in the primary. Different surveys have shown different things, but the George Mason Washington Post poll showed that Gillespie was not getting what he needs to get among Republicans, and that was what accounting for the significant lead Northam had at that point. A Republican can't win in this state without getting their base out. Even when they get it out there some years, if the Democrats do a better job, we don't win, like the last 3 presidential elections. But you have to get your base out. And right now, the Republican base, not here, but everywhere, Republicans having trouble driving it out. We're seeing that in special elections around the country. Democrats are just, they're easier to get to the polls. They're, if you will, a little more enthusiastic than Republicans.
So then you would say that if you were advising the Gillespie campaign, I know that I understand they are having a dialogue right now with the White House, but you would encourage the Gillespie campaign to get the president to stump for him maybe at a rally along the 81 corridor, right? You think that's the right move?
I think, look, whether he likes it or not, whether Ed likes it or not at this point, Trump is going to become more of a factor every day in this race. If you looked at the early polls, he was not a factor. I think in a post poll, 37% of the voters, he was a factor. And with the ads now running, I think Trump becomes more of a factor in this race. The question is, do you want to try to use the positives? That certainly has some negatives attached to it in urban areas. But do you want to use the positives with that as well, or try to ignore them? I understand that Ed Gillespie is not Donald Trump, and he's done the best he can to put his distance between it. But you need those Trump voters at the end of the day. And I don't know that a tweet does it. I'm sure it's something they're wrestling with. They haven't talked to me about it. But bringing him into that corridor at this point, I think, helps they drive up that rural turnout, which they need a huge turnout to win.
So Tom Davis, who is with us now, Tom Davis, former Republican Congressman, Northern Virginia, never lost an election in Virginia, as he said, in 29 years, very long time. So, Tom, if Ed Gillespie called you right now and said, Tom, I need your advice, the president would like to come to campaign for me on the 81 corridor, you would recommend that, right?
I would. I wouldn't recommend he bring him into Fairfax, but,
right.
And look, he's going to get some negatives and some pushback on this. But I haven't seen who knows where the real polls are in this race, as I talk about, but the published polls to date have shown a preference for Northam in every race. He's got to shake it up some way, and he's already getting tagged with the Trump negatives. Northam's campaign is doing a good job of saying, where is he on Trump? May as well get the positives. And you've got to get your base out. Again, Virginia, 2 one-party states. You have to drive your base out. Look, the president's not universally popular in the state, but he is among the Republican base. And there is some evidence that there are some Republicans that are less than enthusiastic going to an independent over this. You want to make sure you get them. And having the president here is one way to do that.
Well, look, I think, Tom Davis, you're spot on with this because he's already getting whatever the negatives of President Trump are with Virginia voters. He's already absorbing the negatives of that. He's not getting the positives of the loyalist Trump base following, which the only way you're going to get him out is if the president goes and comes to a rally. You're not going to get him out with Corey Stewart, and you're so right. You're not going to get him out with a tweet. You're not going to get him out with Mike Pence coming to Abington. You're only going to get him out by getting the president to come to Virginia and everything that goes with it. And I think you're right. Doing that in Southwest Virginia along the 81 corridor, right thing to do. You also nailed it. It's tough to get the rural vote out in a non-federal election. It's tough to do. People, they got other things going on, and so I think that would definitely spike it. Tom Davis, let's get to the lieutenant governor's race. Justin Fairfax campaigning like he's the candidate for the Democratic Socialist Workers Party. Jill Vogel, on the surface to us, seems to be running a pretty solid campaign. What do you make of that one?
I think the average voter still doesn't know either one of them. This is a race where we're seeing more straight ticket voting than any time in history, but I think if Jill opens up the last 2 weeks with some TV that can differentiate her and define herself, she's in the hunt.
Do you have any idea if she's planning on that?
I don't know. I've got she called me. I got to call her back and just talk. But she's an attractive candidate. This is a race where really neither one are very well known statewide. So they tend to go along with the top of the ticket. Voters tend to come out and vote a straight ticket on this. But if she can put the right message together in the closing weeks, we've seen differentiators before in Virginia, where they'll vote Republican or Democrat for governor and flip in the other races. So I think that race is still up in the air.
So, look, she certainly has the resources to do that. The last time we had a split ticket governor, a lieutenant governor, that would have been 2005, right? Kane,
yeah, but we almost had it last time, and we've had recounts a couple of times along the way. So, yeah.
Right.
So it depends how close the governor's race is. Obviously, if Gillespie loses it by 6-8 points, it's going to be tough for her. But I think she has the potential to run the strongest.
All right, let's get to Attorney General John Adams at a big disadvantage, fighting an incumbent, Mark Herring. Let me get your take on this. I think one of the great ironies, Tom, of this campaign is that when it started out 12 months ago, Tom Herring, the Attorney General, was seen as the progressive, kind of left-wing activist-based candidate of whoever the three would be. And now we get 3 weeks out, and he becomes the moderate, the centrist in this ticket, running campaign ads that are very pro-business center, talking about opioids, talking about some of the things he did with getting money back from predatory companies and things of that nature. John Adams, he's going to be outspent, doesn't have the name ID, but he's got a lot of energy and a great resume. What do you think?
Well, again, I think these things tend to go as a ticket on this. Adams has raised a lot of money from the Attorney General's associations and the like. I think the base likes him as we move through here. It really depends on where Gillespie runs at the top of the ticket. If Gillespie goes down by 5 or 6 points, I think it's difficult to overcome that. If it's within the margin of error, I think we'll have to see. Adams has impressed a lot of people. He was a Supreme Court clerk, VMI graduate. He has some crossover appeal at this point. But it really depends where that top of the ticket is and how big the margin is in the governor's race should the Democrats win it.
So who do you think will, on the Republican side, who do you think will lead the ticket in raw votes?
Well, you always get more votes for governor than the others because there's a drop-off as you go through in raw votes. Right. But in percentages, and looking at it right now, I think Jill probably performs the best. But, that's why you have elections. That's what it looks like.
That's right.
Just remind you, there are 3 weeks to go with this, and the top of the ticket will determine, that's 95% of the equation is how does the top of the ticket run. Because most people that show up are going to vote a straight ticket, and that includes the legislature, which we haven't talked about.
Well, let's get to the House. I'm projecting the Democrats are going to pick up 3 seats. Or what say you?
I think it's going to be more around 6. Now, I'm giving
6
to Republican candidates. I'm helping marginal Republicans. I hope it's not near there. You're asking me as a prognosticator at this point. And I think part of that is just the way the year evolves and where the vulnerable Republicans are in Northern Virginia, and the fact that the ticket seems to be lagging there.
Well, look, there's
and a question, and they have ability to survive some waves, but it could be pretty high up here.
So we're talking because 2 seats are gone. These are the 2 seats of retiring Republican incumbents. Mike Dudenhefter in Loudoun County, gone. You can mail it in. Democrats are going to pick that one up. The Albo seat, gone. That's 2 pickups there. I'm figuring they're going to pick up one other one in Northern Virginia, but the vulnerable seats are Tag, Greason, LeMunyon, Ligenfelter, Miller, right? Those are 4 I can just name right off the bat. Some people say Bob Marshall, although I don't think that's now at risk, but some people put him in that group. So you got maybe 5 there, and then you got the seat in Blacksburg. But, of course, every cycle they say that Ed's going to get beat, and every cycle he wins. So I'm not sure they'll be able to beat him. But, look, I mean, that could be 6 plus the other 2 that are like a done deal. So that could be 8, right? Possible.
Yeah. John, look, every seat in Fairfax, Loudoun, and Prince William, if you're an incumbent running in a year like this, Republican, you have to run through the tape. You don't know how high that wave is going to be, and that wave is bringing people out from high-rises, bringing them out from apartments to vote, and while they're there, they just vote straight across. And that every Republican faces that dilemma here, and is challenged by the turnout models. So if you're a Republican in Prince William, Loudoun, or Fairfax, you got to run through the tape, and you have some level of vulnerability to this. You have some more than others. And then you have the Massey seat in Richmond, which I think is still a potentially competitive seat. They're telling me in Virginia Beach you feel comfortable about it. I'll believe it when I see it. I've just seen it. But hopefully these guys go. As I said, I've contributed to the House Republicans, and I'm hopeful. But you're asking me as an analyst, in a year like this, I get very nervous.
Hey, Tom, you had a phone call coming in. You were talking about Virginia Beach. Can you repeat? You just said you had just seen something, and I missed it. Can you just say that over?
When I see it, I think any urban district in a year like this, urban districts, you've got to run through the tape. You've got to be at risk. Democratic turnout in these areas, I think, is significant, and Republicans have a dispirited turnout model. They're looking at Congress. They're saying, "I elect you guys. What have you done for me? Why should I turn out?" I think there's a huge malaise among a lot of Republican voters. Just looking across the river at Washington, I think that gets reflected in Virginia.
I think you're spot on with that, Tom. I got about a minute and a half. Final question. President Trump last night at midnight, when you were at the Nationals game, suffering through that debacle, the administration says he is going to stop approving the $7 billion subsidies to insurance companies for Obamacare. And he says he getting out of the business of funding Obamacare, and Congress has got to figure it out. Right move, wrong move?
Well, it's certainly not the path of least resistance, but Congress for a long time has kind of abandoned any role they have in taking part of any decisions, and now immigration and now health care, he's put it right back in their lap. So we'll see. Let's see how it turns out. At this point, it puts a lot into question, and he's taking the hit on that. But potentially, you could come up with some better solutions.
All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Tom Davis for being with us. Tom Davis, former congressman in leadership in the House Republican caucus under the Newt Gingrich speakership, and certainly before that, never lost an election in Virginia for how long, Tom? 29 years?
Yeah, in Northern Virginia. In Fairfax.
In Northern Virginia.
You got to remember, this is tough country up here for Republicans, but it's always good to me.
When are you going to come back? When are you going to come back in politics?
You're my friend. You don't need to wish that on me. But anyway, always enjoy being on the show, John.
All right, Tom Davis, thanks for being with us. Have a good weekend. Say hi to your wife.
I will.
And please do that. We'll be back. Keep it right here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Tom Davis says Republicans are going to lose 6 seats. He says Ed's behind and needs to bring Trump in, and says that Jill Vogel needs to advertise in the final 2 weeks. So I think what he's saying is Jill needs to write a check to herself and put those ads on TV. That's, I think, what he said. I'm paraphrasing it, but that's the feeling I got. So Jill Vogel, Tom Davis says, get your checkbook out, make a check out yourself for $1 million to the Jill Vogel campaign, and go run ads.